Welcome to Prepare For Takeoff. I'm the creator and host, Terry L. Cyrus. We're the podcast dedicated to amplifying Black excellence. Every week, we sit down with a proven professional or a rising entrepreneur. This week, we're sitting down with Howard Stevenson, professor, doctor, and co-founder of a nonprofit. Dr. Stevenson, what's going on?
Hello, how you doing, Terry? Good to meet you and see you.
Likewise, Dr. Stevenson, please allow us to salute you and all of what it is you're doing in higher ed, as well as in the nonprofit space, as well as in the therapeutic community. And a lot of people who look like us seem to be adverse to going to therapy. So I'm sure that this conversation is going to allow us to break down some of those barriers. And then you've been in the classroom setting for 30 some years, which is hard to believe because you don't look a day over 38 yourself. And that's at the highest of levels at University of Pennsylvania. But before we get into all of that, I'm sure you didn't just land where we see you today. So let's talk about how it all started. Where's home for you?
So I grew up in Milton, Delaware, which is basically the woods. In Delaware, there are actually two Delawares people don't realize there's upper and lower. And people in upper Delaware think of people in lower Delaware as lower Delaware. Because it's very cultural, very much like the Deep South. The racism growing up was very much like Alabama, Mississippi. And even the language was different, very much farmland. So my brother, I grew up in a family, my mother and father, both African-American. I'm the oldest of three. My brother, Brian Stevenson, has become a famous lawyer. My sister, Christy, is a musician, and we're very close to each other. I'm 15 months older than him. He's 11 months older than my sister. And my father and mother, even though both of them are Black, they're culturally different. He grew up in Southern Delaware. She grew up in North Philly. And there's no two places in the world that are culturally different than North Philadelphia and Southern Delaware. So they always battled over culture. Where's the best place to raise a child and where's civilization really at? Because when we say country, it's really country where we grew up. But we loved each other. Very, very intense, faith-focused family. ME church that we would go to, which is a particular theology of faith and fight.
So is that down Route 13? Is that where you grew up at, down that way?
Very good, yeah. But technically, you have to come off 13 and a couple other roads to get to where we are. But you're in the right. You know a little bit. That's good.
Is it a good number of people of color there, or were you guys one of few people of color in your town?
Nope. There were a lot of Black folks where we grew up in this wooded community that stretched like 3 miles, 4 miles. The nearest store you had to go for 5 miles at that time. That was a big deal. And for the most part, it's woods. And so in a nutshell, you have one school that spans, 20, 25 miles. In that sense, if you can think of country and rural, most of our playground was in the woods.
So now you grew up there, and then it was time to go to college. Did you stay in Delaware? Did you relocate out of the state?
Yes, I literally, because I was playing 3 sports, basketball, baseball, and soccer. I only went out for soccer in high school, 10th grade. I was 15, because the basketball team was the bomb. That was the team you wanted to get on. I thought if I joined the soccer team, I would be in shape for basketball season in the winter. And it doesn't work that way, but that's what I was thinking. And the next year, my brother followed me and also played. But I got really good at soccer. I started as a goalkeeper, but by my senior year, I became a scorer. So in my senior year, I scored 25 goals, led the state of Delaware. And the college found me, Eastern University, which is out in St. David's, PA, next to Villanova. They recruited me, and I played there for 4 years, scored 72 goals with them. And then I went to Fuller Theological Seminary and clinical psychology school out in Pasadena, California.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciated the theology, but my goal was to be a clinical psychologist. Graduated from there, got to play soccer in Mexico. Throughout my life, I've been playing soccer. It's kept me alive, kept me traveling, and allowed me to manage the learning and play. So, and then I came back to Philly. I became a family therapist at the Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic for several years, and then and worked for the state of Delaware also for child mental health. And then eventually I got the job here at Penn as a professor. And since then, I've been doing projects that have to do with science and also that are therapeutic, particularly in our community growing up. we didn't see any psychologists. We didn't even know what a therapist was. And even now, folks are a little worried about what it means to go to therapy. So I've created interventions that use natural healers. The Black church that I came out of was a healing space. We were always singing. My parents were very involved in putting music together with faith and healing. And we recruited children from around the woods within like a 20-mile radius. Families would let my parents, they've argued all the time, but they came together around the choir. And so the two of them pulled off a large choir of young people. And that same vibe, we still think about how do you bring natural healing? Because we'll never degree enough therapists to deal with the mental health challenges in our communities.
Mm-hmm.
And we have trained barbers, for example, to be health educators to Black men between the age of 18 to 20, 18 to 24. Because, in a barbershop, Black men will come, stay all day, and say everything about their life and never get a haircut. There's something about a barbershop that's therapeutic and healing. And we just brought some science to it to say, how can we multiply this for different neighborhoods, given the crises in our communities? That's therapeutic and healing. And we just brought some science to it to say, how can we multiply this for different neighborhoods, given the crises in our communities?
That's very innovative, man, because my uncle had a barbershop and you could go there all day and get all of the neighborhood news on what was going on. And people would share stories and ask for advice and whatnot. But you're absolutely right, man. People felt as though the barbershop was a safe space. And to be able to confide in their barber when maybe there weren't as many people in there, that may have been a different conversation if it was just you and the barber. And then to arm him or her with information that can help them to a pathway of recovery as it pertains to what it is they're struggling with. I mean, that's ingenious. That's the first I've ever heard of that, but that's very forward thinking, to say the least. And speaking of forward thinking individuals, so you're somebody that, even though you played all these different sports, soccer is the thing that took you out of Delaware, even though your focus was maybe on basketball, but it was soccer that took you to Eastern University. And then not only did you go there and star, to say the least, as far as the number of goals, as you said, that you were able to score, it seems as though your trajectory just continued to intensify. Seems like you scored more goals in college than you did in high school. Is that a safe assessment?
Yeah, I have more years to do it, actually. But the point of it is that, it was a sport for me, for my body, for my speed, and the way that it was a beautiful game. And I wish I had learned it earlier. I got a chance to play in Africa for a summer and for an All-American team. And it was like being in 6 different countries in Africa was a blessing because I got to meet people. I was the only Black player on the team. And when we were in Lagos, Nigeria, man, you would have thought I was the king because they came out of everywhere from the national stadium in Lagos, and they saw this American team, and they saw one Black player, and so I was being interviewed by the newspapers, and I was 19 at the time. I didn't know I didn't know what to do, to be honest with you, but it was a blessing to go through that early. So it was a game that we didn't grow up with, but it has stayed with us in our lives for sure.
You were the Jackie Robinson of soccer.
Well, if you call Delaware the place to be, absolutely, for sure.
What kind of adjustment did you have to make from going from the East Coast to the West Coast for doing your graduate studies?
Well, that's an interesting question because I thought one thing in particular, the way people thought about race is very diverse in Southern California, and navigating the politics of difference was unique. And whereas the politics of race in the East Coast seemed to be a lot more direct and protest focused and not so much in Southern California. But I learned a lot in being in different neighborhoods in California. So Pasadena is often you see on the Rose Bowl, right? You see the parades and every New Year's. And I actually did a lot of work in neighborhoods. My first client, families, was in a part of Pasadena that wasn't as posh. And one of the family members come into the house and had just been cut on her neck by someone trying to hit on her in a speakeasy, as it were. And only thing she could think about was being angry that somebody disrespected her. And I saw her bleeding. And I long story short, it was an interesting lesson in how to navigate the politics when you don't trust police, when you don't feel like you can call on anybody. And I was wanting to call the police. I was like, And I took her to the hospital. I was saying to the grandmothers, like, we got to call the police. She said, no, no, that's not how we work about things here, because the police don't come. And 2 days by, nobody came. 3 days by. So I learned early about the lessons in other cities, but in this particular one, that they had to have their own set of policing going on to find the person who had done this, how family can be. But it was my first event in learning around how the neighborhoods manage, harm. And in a particular way, culture matters in these moments. And so a lesson you can't necessarily get in school.
It seems as though growing up in those woods, but you were rooted in community. You were rooted in around people that look like you. So it seems as though you carried that along with you to
Absolutely.
Philadelphia as well as California. And so when you were in these places and spaces, it was very easy for you to adjust to those norms that those communities subscribe to.
Absolutely.
And then you continued that work once you finished your graduate studies. So what prompted you to want to come back to the East Coast? Was it a matter of wanting to be closer to family, or did you want to get back to the community as you knew it, as far as in the city of Philadelphia?
Well, part of it was the kind of training. I believed in the community in a lot of ways, but I also wanted to be a family therapist, and watching my own family navigate life. I was interested in how families as a unit can build health for their children. And so the style of family therapy was also very cultural. And so I learned from some natural healers in the West Philly community, who were trained by a famous therapist, Salvador Minuchin, who was a psychiatrist, but they brought their own cultural style to the training and added to it. And I learned from them. They were folks from the neighborhood. One in particular, his name was Paul, and he was a pool hustler. He had this reputation of hustling, but he was a natural therapist because we took on some of the toughest kids in Philly, and I was an understudy for him. I had my PhD, but I was watching and studying under him because his way of both challenging and connecting with the young men. And in the Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic, we would have 16, 17 Black men around from 3 to 6 in the afternoon. So much so that people were like worried when they would come into the space, because this man had the skills that I was best therapist I've ever had a chance to witness and work with. But these young men who were struggling became putty in his hands. They were open because he cared for them, but he held them accountable, even to the point of asking them if they weren't listening to do push-ups in the process. So he was tough and he was loving at the same time, and he didn't hold back on either. So that was also the beginning of my learning as well.
Did you see a stark difference between practical experience by comparison to classroom experience that you was able to inherit while in college?
Absolutely, absolutely. But we grew up with families as well in our community of folks who didn't even finish high school, because in Southern Delaware, when they were children, there were no high schools. You had to go to Northern Delaware, to Wilmington, which at that time, for my father's folks, they had to going to Wilmington would have been like going to Los Angeles. That's how far away it was for them.
Right.
These people in the church helped to raise us, even though they didn't finish school, but they believed in us enough that, wherever you go, you can't forget where you come from. So that was a lesson we all learned, that we can't forget where we came from. And that has been a part of our work as well.
One of the places that people tend to have the most faith and trust in is in these faith-based communities. So these are things that we can point to people during those formidable years in church, then that's a great start. But what I've been told, and I'm sure you can expand on this and even get into the why this is a lot of people, they're not going to church like they did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So if that's where the message is, the people who need the message may not necessarily receive that message, but
Yeah,
everybody's on their phone. So that's why we saw fit to say, well, let's meet people where they are. Like if you're
absolutely.
consuming content on your phone, if you're consuming content on television by way of YouTube, we want to meet you where you are, not necessarily where we want you to be. But I wanted to just rewind that and ask the question, why do you think that is? Why do you think that people they're not going to church at the same rate that they were in the 70s and 80s? Like, why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I think it is what's relevant for people today, and in a sense, we all have to change. We think of church not changing as if somehow we are holding on to a message, but the church has always changed as over time, right? In a way that has to address with what's now. Like in this particular moment when hate is being spewed, you could tell some pastors that are actually addressing it directly. It's like the elephant in the room, and others not so much. And so I think you do have places where young people are saying, you're listening to what I'm listening to, you're seeing what I'm seeing, and you're also fighting what's bothering me in a way that I can follow that, right? And so now we're looking for voices like the boycotts that's been going on, right? In a sense that how do you teach people, a whole new group of young people, about protests that in the 60s was not a lesson. Everybody learned that lesson, or most people learned a lesson, right, about why you speak up against hate and discrimination. And now it's like we got to start all over again, but we need icons that are willing to say, here's how you do it.
The icons, sad but unfortunately true, they're either entertainers or athletes. And more times than not, there's people, with the exception of LeBron James, there's a lot of people that says, listen, everybody buys sneakers, everybody goes to the games. I don't want to get involved in politics. And I want to use my platform to send out messaging that isn't related to my craft, which I definitely feel is a mistake. Because if you have those eyeballs, if you have that ability to message and galvanize the troops, if you will, why not use it? Because at some point, you too have to come back to the neighborhood,
Yeah.
and people in that neighborhood won't forget.
And especially if you have hard times, right? When we're wealthy and things are going well, we think we can maintain distance to protect our brand or whatever it is we're protecting. But every now and then, we think about in our work with the nonprofit that we call the Lion Story, and it's based on an African proverb: the lion story will never be known as long as a hunter is the one to tell it. Well, for a lot of people, their stories include not just the beauty, but also the ugly, right? What Wade Nobles, a black psychologist out of Oakland, said, called the rupture and the splendor of our existence. If you want humanity, you got to deal with both. And when you deal with the rupture, you realize that all that can either be taken away, or my capacity to be that talented won't last. And at some point, I might need the same people who've been asking for help to help me. And in a sense, part of the message we're trying to say is that we need natural healers. We need people from our communities. And when we want community, we got to build it up and be there to do it.
We need to have more brothers like you, Dr. Stevenson, because you're somebody who you still find yourself at the top of the mountain, being a professor for 30 plus years at University of Pennsylvania, but still being rooted in a community where you want to see that change and be that resource to people who may not necessarily ever walk the halls of UPenn, but they will walk the halls of business or establishment in West Philly and North Philly. They're going to get a haircut. These sisters are going to go to the beauty salon. And these are the people who really need the help. And they may not necessarily be getting the help. But I want to rewind to what led you to taking your talents to the University of Pennsylvania, because we're talking about this is one of the most esteemed universities in the country, not just in the region. But what led to that? And talk me through what that process is consisted of for you as a faculty member.
Well, I didn't really think about Ivy League, even though people were talking about it. I honestly didn't know. In fact, when I got out of Eastern University, I applied to the University of Pennsylvania psychology program, and they moved my application to the master's program. So I was going to a doctoral program. They moved it, and I got into the master's program here at Penn. And then they sent me the bill, and I called them up. I said, there must be a mistake, because there's a lot of, I think there are too many zeros here. And the person on the other line, she was laughing so loud. I was like, it took her like 20 seconds to start talking again. And she said, "Oh, no, no, no. That's how much it costs." And I said, "Okay." So I ended up going out to Fuller in California, Pasadena, because it was a lot less expensive.
Right.
And it was a clinical psychology doctoral program connected to a theology school. So I ended up getting a master's in theology, even though that's what I was going for. I still appreciate it, and a PhD. But part of that is the message that I was still country. I came out of Southern Delaware. So if you talk to anybody of my people, they'll want to, if you go back home, they'll expect you to know their name, be honest with you. And I can't remember everybody's name. One time, my sister and I were outside barbecuing, and some guy was riding on a bike. He said, and people will come up to you and they say, "You remember me? Do you remember me? You don't know me." I said, man, he said, finally. And then he said, I wanted to talk to you. And then he rode off. And my sister said, I said, Christy, what happened? He said, yeah, that was his name. His name was Man. So you did, so I passed the test, but I didn't know his name was Man. I just said, Man. But that's the kind of people that you have to navigate. And if you forget them, they'll tell you about it. And in that sense, being at Penn was an opportunity from a former mentor that gave me the opportunity to actually be a visiting professor. And I can write and I can publish and I can do what the work was, even though I have my challenges being in a space like this. But you follow your dream and your vision and you got to fight. And you got to fight for that. And that's just life.
Mm-hmm.
But you also can't forget where you came from.
Thinking about starting your own business? Make it real with Shopify, the all-in-one platform trusted by millions to sell online and in person. Whether it's merch, art, or digital goods, Shopify gives you the tools to build, grow, and succeed. And here's the best part. When you sign up using the affiliate link in our show notes, you're supporting Prepare for Takeoff and starting your business off right. Click the link and start your free trial today. Talk us through like some of the coursework that you teach there and lead, and some of the things that, we've had the challenge to know our reality to be, unfortunately sad but true, based on a person who's occupying the White House. And when you think of anything that's rooted in culture and diversity, it seems like it's on the attack now. And he's attempting to pull funding from universities that are supporting that kind of work. So I wanted to see how you're navigating that and things of that nature.
So I run a center called the Resilience Empowerment Collaborative, and it has been based on my research that is around racial socialization and what we now call racial literacy. And so racial socialization is simply the science of understanding how families protect their children from hate. So for my first 15 to 20 years, we were really studying how do families, what did they say? How do, given the talk, because my parents had their own style of talk. My mother in particular would prepare us for going into the white spaces. And I have a TED talk about that whole process of racial socialization. But what we learned is that the more families talk to their kids about race or prepare them for, hateful moments, if it showed up in school, if it showed up online, if it showed up at work, those families were better prepared to deal with it than those who didn't get the talk. The challenge was some parents didn't give the talk because they were still dealing with their own trauma. So when their kids were needing feedback, they would give a proverb, but a proverb like, if you lay down with dogs, you don't get up with fleas. And that's supposed to be the racial socialization lesson for the rest of your life. But in reality, you need more specific skills. You need to be able to stand up for yourself. You need to know the harm that it's done to your heart, body, mind, and soul. And so we moved to racial literacy, which is much more skill-based. And with that, I teach a course on psychology of the African Americans. All the courses I teach, this science is a part of it. I teach another course and co-lead with the founder of the course, Brother Shamari. Eric Grimes is his name, and he, along with Brother Rob Carter, the three of us co-teach a class on the psychoeducational interactions with Black males. And that has been going on for 17 years. The other class, Psychology of the American, has been going on for 35 years. And I've taught that 2 to 3 times a year my first 10 to 15 years, and I realized I shouldn't be teaching that much. But I also teach a family therapy course and an advanced psychotherapy course because I still am a therapist. So it's a combination of those courses. And we get students from Wharton to the business school to the med school and law school, students of color and others who want to understand how to navigate the stress of hate and racism in particular, especially if you're going to be a teacher going into neighborhood schools, especially if you're in the ER and you're navigating young people who are dealing with gunshot wounds and sickle cell and the science on how you're being mistreated if people don't understand what the racial conundrums are. As an ER doctor, there's a science about that. We can improve those doctors' capacity to treat those young people well, but it takes work.
All of that sounds like phenomenal work, but sometimes it seems that now the reality that we live in, anything that is going to aid and support people of color is on the attack. Have you had any of those challenges administratively?
Yes.
And if so, how have you had to navigate that?
Well, the university has been under attack. Universities have been under attack around how much they are pushing DEI.
Right.
And the benefit for us is that we have still freedom of speech within the context of the institution. very little has been demanded with regard to that. And so as I said, I've been teaching the course since I've been here. I haven't stopped for 35 years. And the other course we started 17 years ago. So that hasn't happened. But universities are still being, attacked because they are pushing certain policies. And what we teach people is that you got to find a way and find your courage to stand up to this kind of hate. People are afraid that their children are going to be picked up, and children are afraid their parents are going to be picked up off the streets by people who won't even show their face. So in our classes, we have to talk about that. And part of the message we were talking about earlier, that it's hard to fight injustice without a healing strategy. Part of our work at Lion Story, as well as my sciences, we have to increase our healing of folks, because we will be in the fight, but we'll die sooner because we haven't taken care of ourselves. And so in all my classes, we're teaching, how do you take care of yourself even under this kind of duress? And people are stunned, they're paralyzed. And how do you get out of that paralysis? Because part of you doesn't believe it could be happening. And while that is happening, we are stunned. We need to get out of that. And so our strategies around that we think of in our interventions help people to get unstuck, to notice the harm to your body, your thoughts, your feelings, which is around your health. And
Right.
once you know that, you'll change whether you let anybody say anything to you, or you'll change your own acceptance of it. It's just the way it is. And we know a lot of people in our neighborhoods who just beat up and they don't have a fight back. But we can teach you how to take care of yourself in those. And then there are people like my brother who teach people how to stand up to injustice politically, or using legal strategies in order to do that, standing up for folks who don't have voice. So there are multiple scholars, experts, community leaders that we need to follow, and wisdom, and pastors, and to be able to fight back against what we're seeing in this country, because it's no joke.
Man, it's crazy. And I do believe that it has to be a collaborative effort. It can't just be one group of people.
Mm,
We have to band
mm,
together. One of the things that even with our podcast, we realize and understand that Black excellence is not just comprised to one industry. We
mm-hmm.
have Black excellence in the classroom. We have Black excellence in the seminary. We have Black excellence in fields of medicine. We have Black excellence on Wall Street, et cetera,
Yes.
et cetera, et cetera. We have to show people who they can become. And even the people who find themselves doing something they don't necessarily want to do, they're not passionate about that. We try to encourage people, Dr. Stevenson, to walk in your purpose on purpose.
Yeah.
It's never too late. So you may see somebody that's doing something that you've always wanted to do, and hearing her story on how she got there, you may pivot and say,
Yeah.
I've been doing this for an extended period of time, but now after listening to this brother, I want to do something. I want to give of myself in the capacity that I'm not currently given. And people don't understand that you can't necessarily allow what the monetization of that skill set is to discourage you from pursuing that. A lot of times people say, well, I can't afford the pay cut. I can't this, I can't that. Well,
Mm-hmm.
we have to learn how to be multidimensional in that sense, because
Yes.
we're already that individual, Dr. Stevenson. Like, we can't be the same way we are in the barbershop, in the boardroom.
Right. Right. Yep. And I would say, I would shout out for my colleagues, Dr. Loretta Jamat and John Jamat, who also, we all three put together the barbershop. I think there's the Barbershop Project. Over 5 years, we worked with 50 barbershops across Philadelphia and reached 680 men, Black men between 18 and 24. There's Black excellence in these barbers and beauticians who spend their time standing all day, getting back pains and arm pains, talking and keeping alive and teaching. So how do we take these natural healers as excellence as well, and role models that we can learn from and support, part of that message you saying, go with others.
I totally agree. I think that those individuals, they'll have a greater impact than somebody in these
Hmm.
places and spaces where it's very difficult to get to, because the masses won't be able to relate to that individual. No matter how many times that Tyler Perry tells this story, or Steve Harvey tells this story, people can't lose sight of the fact, well, your reality now isn't that. So I can't relate but so much to what you're saying. You said you were homeless, but now you're living in an estate with your
Yeah,
own private airport runway, if you will.
yeah, yeah.
And now I'm still in the trenches, and I'm expected to believe that I can get to where you are, if
Hmm.
I just believe. You
Right.
need to sometimes find that person who was interacting with that person on a day in, day out basis and saying,
Yeah,
man, how can I pour into you a little at a time? Because we have to give people messaging, Dr. Stevenson, that's digestible.
absolutely.
And it's like anything, if you eat too much in one sitting, you're going to get sick.
Hmm.
So we
Yeah.
have to pour into these brothers and sisters in a manner in which is digestible. So I want to get to the work that you're doing with the nonprofit, give you the opportunity to further unpack what that work consists of as well.
We have a couple of projects, as I mentioned, the Barbershop. There's another project we call Play, which stands for Preventing Long-Term Anger and Aggression in Youth. And right now, it involves taking the benefits to health and your brain of physical activity. And we've used basketball and other places. We use soccer and ping pong. Some people have used it for where you have physical activity, where there is competition, where there's enough energy, where people will find themselves stressed, but we teach them how to manage the stress, because the way you mismanage the stress on the court, we can see it in the classroom, we can see it on the street corner. So we look for times of conflicts to learn how young people manage it, and we teach them strategies. So there's a physical activity basketball component. There's a group therapy component where we teach Black history and the history of, so that one of the lessons we teach about Emmett Till is to have them understand the politics of hate. And that lesson is still relevant, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you could be no bigger than this, and yet somebody could still see you as a threat. How is that possible? There's so much you can teach on Emmett Till, right? And to what degree can we apply it to now? So we have sessions and lessons about that in the group therapy. And the young men will talk about their stories in such a way that they've never told anybody, right? And cry. And when they're done, they got to get back out into the classroom. They got to get back out into the neighborhoods. They got to put themselves back together. But some of them have poetry, they got rap to tell their narratives in a way that we can make therapeutic. So you've got the physical activity, you've got the group therapy. And when we started, we also had a martial arts condition. What I'm saying is, in this kind of component that's neighborhood based is in 5 cities: Jacksonville, Florida; New Orleans, Louisiana; Washington, D.C., Binghamton, New York, and Memphis, starting up in Memphis, Tennessee. And in a way, you're asked to bring families together for these events. You're asked to bring these natural healers. And I'm excited about that. And we've been doing it since 1990, supported by science, supported by research money that then turned into interventions that can stay. And if you put that with the Barbershop Project, and you put together the ideas of how we can build communities in 2 to 3 block radiuses, right? What if pastors work with school teachers, work with barbershops and beauty salons, work with community colleges in a 3 to 4 block radius? Because the barbers, when we went to the barbers, they would tell us they think they're private, courageous heroes that nobody knows about. They said, we stop wars, we stop fights between gangs, and nobody comes to interview us anytime. So we spent 6 years with them. They were telling us, Dr. Jamat Loretta and John Jamat, just gathering their stories, because they think and beauty about, if you're in a barbershop chair, you're going to hear the story from the barber. And we gave them a script and an iPad to teach the skills. And when you're in that chair, brother, you're getting support, you're getting feedback, you're getting touch. You cannot leave, right? No matter how much. And some people will wait for the barber for what? Hour, 2 hour, 3 hours. But that one barber is your barber, which means you're going to listen. And we found, the men told us, out of 680 men, about 90% of them said, the barbershop is the only place I can go where 95% of the time I not only leave, I can't even go to other places where I walk away feeling, not only feeling good, but looking good.
Right.
And I can't find that in a lot of other places in my life. So how do we bring communities to be natural healing spaces?
I want to give you the opportunity one more time to share with our viewers and listeners the name of the nonprofit, as well as the website or where they can
Sure.
find you at on social media.
The Lion Story is the name of the nonprofit. It's www.thelionstory.org, 2 S's in the middle. I'm the co-founder with Dr. Brian Peterson. We started it at Penn. Currently, Lisa Nelson Haynes is the executive director. We just had a fundraiser. And www.thelionstory.org. And sure, certainly professionals are struggling with this stuff, we can give you. Because a lot of people stuck and paralyzed, they're not sure what to do. We'll
Hmm.
help you find the courage to reconnect to your purpose because you have a purpose, but you've lost it. And we've all been knocked upside the head and stunned. So, how do we get our courage and purpose back? We can help people with that.
One time I attended a conference many years ago, Dr. Stevenson, and this brother was leading a seminar on Black trauma. And he was talking about the impact that just being Black has on your, not just your mental health, but your physical health. And he said,
Yes.
by nature, we all have fight or flight. So if a bear comes, you're either going to, you're going to, I guess it's not going to be a fair fight, but you
No,
may try to do something to
yeah.
resist the bear from doing the inevitable, or you may try to run. Maybe a bear is not the best animal to pick. Let's say a dog or something. That might even be rough. But nonetheless, he was saying that it's in our nature where if something happens to you, to your earlier point, to stand up for yourself, to say something, to speak out, to let that person know that you're unhappy with what you're being exposed to. But in our community, especially when we're pulled over by someone like the police, we're expected to have to just internalize what that is, internalize being demoralized, being demeaned, being talked down to because you're so fearful of what may happen to you. So long after you receive the ticket, long after you're at home safe and sound, just the weight of what you just experienced, it just
Hmm.
weighs on you. And he was saying that is kind of that was one of the examples he gave as it relates to Black trauma and how that can impact you, not just mentally and emotionally, but physically, because stress will lead to all kinds of other disorders. Stress has been linked to cancer, has been linked to all kinds of other things. And if you're constantly being exposed to stress that you have no control over de-escalating or even getting that off your chest, and you're forced to have to internalize it, it's like
Hmm.
anything, it's going to wear on you and it's going to show up in different capacities. And then, of course, they're going to say, oh, well, the reason why Black people don't live as long is because of their diet. Our diet may not be all that different from people that don't look like us, our white counterparts. But the difference is our white counterparts, they're not being exposed to those things. If they get pulled over, they're asking for badge numbers, they're asking for this, asking for that, and they're going to get solutions that are far more favorable than if you and I find ourselves in that same situation. So I think the work you're doing, not just with the
Hmm.
nonprofit, but as well as in the classroom, it gives people tools for their toolbox to help them offset that reality in a manner that will serve them well. How was my assessment of all of what was just expressed to you?
That was brilliant. You broke it down because in a way that's what we're trying to say. If we just throw the word therapy out, but we say, are you tired of being thought of as the bear? Our children are thought of as the bear. When the cop stops you, the cop thinks that you're the bear. So
Mhm.
so in a sense, the threat from other people projecting on you takes its toll on your heart, your body, mind, and soul. And so you describe that. Maybe you don't want to go to therapy, but you want to go to a space that's safe enough for you to let some of that go and not take it on. And some of us do the John Henryism thing, right? We'll think like, I don't care what you say. I can do whatever you say I can't do, right? And I'll overwork. And we'll work ourselves to the bone where we might win the argument but lose the conversation, if that makes
Right.
any sense. And in a way, we die from working so hard to prove that we are more than human when in fact it's the wrong question. We are already human. We are already given by God these graces to be ourselves. We don't have to question it, but we do have to protect ourselves. And whether you call it therapy or telling your story, we all need it. And I think what you're saying, the trauma, we can do something about trauma. Trauma don't have to last always. So
I
you said
agree.
it just right.
And getting back to the Emmett Till piece, a really good friend of mine, Keith Beauchamp, who you may or may not know, he did the documentary, The Untold Story of Emmett Lewis Till. And that was something that he did many years ago. And then that led to him doing the Till feature film alongside Whoopi
Right.
Goldberg and others. And to just be able to tell that story and be able to have the endorsement of Emmett's mother and be able to have that firsthand insight on what that was like to lose a child in such a, you know, brutal manner.
Yeah.
And he was just saying to me, as he shared with me many years ago, the impact that Emmett Till story had on his childhood, having grown up in Louisiana, having been told that story at an early age.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to dedicate himself to uplifting his story. And the documentary led to them reopening the case by they being the Justice Department. So I'm very familiar with the impact that Emmett Till has had on others and how relevant it is today.
Still relevant, still relevant. When we're talking to teenage boys, and I say to them that this, Emmett Till was only this large, and there's always some boy in our groups when we're working with them that look just like you. We can say, imagine you. How do you think you could be perceived as a threat? What kind of world are we in that sees this young boy as a threat? And how can we prepare you for that, right? And they can they can relate to the idea. Does anybody, you get on in Philly, it's called SEPTA, public transportation, and people treat you like you don't belong. And boy, the stories that come out. Yeah, just the other day, I was trying to help a lady with her pocketbook was about to fall out, and she thought I was trying. Those narratives become a way for us to say, that's their projection on you. You don't have to swallow it. You can write your own story.
It's also imperative to make people aware of the fact that you don't have to play hurt. If you suffer an injury on the football field, basketball court, you're going to go to the ER. That's going to be expected of you. And you're going to get the help and treatment that you need. Well, if you're internalizing things, you need to go get the help that you need in that capacity. And break down those barriers that have been placed by people in our community as it relates to therapy.
Yes.
It's I don't think it's conversations like these and people that are doing the work like you that are breaking those barriers down. And then more importantly, how ingenious it is for you to say, let's arm the professionals in the barbershops. Let's arm the people, those individuals that they already trust. Let's give them some information beyond just the parables that they've learned growing up as a child. Let's give them some scientific information to share with that individual. And they're hearing it from their barber, the person who they trust with their look. Like, I'm not going to just anybody. Well, obviously I don't have to worry about a cut, but we know how imperative it is for us to connect with the right barber. And you're right, man. They'll wait for that brother for hours.
Yep. And it's because you went to another person and you realized it didn't work out. That's why you wait all them hours.
Absolutely.
You tried another situation to do.
Right. Because this is how you're going to look for the next 2 or 3 weeks. and we want to be perceived right. And I think the same way we want to look right, and we also want to feel right. The individuals that we should see in the mirror, the holistic individual of being a Black man, being a Black woman, and more importantly, understanding where we come from and not necessarily allowing them to put those projections on you. And if people continue to remind you of the people that you are and the greatness that you have in you, despite your station, despite how much money you make a year, let's forget all of that. We're God's children.
That's right. That's right. And then you got to fight for that too. And people try to take it away from you.
This episode of Prepare for Takeoff is brought to you in part by Riverside, the platform that I trust to record studio quality podcasts right from my laptop. With Riverside, I get crystal clear audio and 4K video. Plus, it's super easy to use. Whether you're a beginner or a pro, Riverside helps your podcast sound amazing. Try it out for yourself. Click the affiliate link in our show notes and start recording like a pro with Riverside. Dr. Stevenson, our conversation, I really enjoyed it and wanted to just give you the opportunity as we close out to leave us with 3 things that you feel will help our viewers and listeners prepare for takeoff.
That's a great question. I think my first thought is play. Find a way to play. Whatever brings you joy, that allows you to be silly and goofy, do that and never stop doing it, no matter who you are, how many people. Teach your children to play because it stimulates your mind. Try, and in that sense, play. The second thing would be try new things you've never done before. Your brain is funky in this way. Once it gets used to something, it can just feel like it goes to sleep. You got to try things that are difficult, that are hard, because you can rewire your brain to think differently about your capacity. So it seems weird, counterintuitive, that I'm going to try something I don't know in order to get better at things for the future. And the last thing will be find somebody who loves you for you, right? There's not everybody, people like you. If you're somewhat famous, they'll follow you no matter what. None of that is useful. Find somebody that gets you as you. And I think if you believe in faith, you believe that the person that you pray to gets you for being you. And then in life, we need to find that person. It may take a while. I can tell you that. But it's only because you got to be holding on to who you are and what you believe. And you can't give yourself up and expect somebody else to know who you are, right? You gotta fight for who you are and love who you are so that you can find somebody who can love you the way you need to be loved, if that makes any sense.
Dr. Stevenson, I'm sure after this conversation, they're going to want to find you. So how can they find you? Your website, social media, LinkedIn? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
All of those, well, really LinkedIn or Instagram, but if you go to the center is my email is Howard S HOWARDS at upenn.edu. But the center, if you go recastingrace.com, you'll get the center, which will get access to everything, stuff we're doing. Recastingrace.com. Yeah.
You said you're on Instagram as well. Is the center on Instagram or are you on Instagram?
I'm on Instagram as well. Yep. And I still don't use it as much, but we've done a lot lately. So just look for Stevenson Jr. You'll be there.
Dr. Stevenson, man, I really enjoyed our conversation. You're doing great work, not just in the classroom, but in the community. I love to see how we can collaborate and find a way to further amplify the great work that you're doing in the community. And you said you're doing it not just in Philadelphia, but in communities throughout the country. So that's great, man. Much continued success. So I just wanted to thank you. And also I wanted to thank our viewers and listeners, whether you're watching us on YouTube or Spotify, or you're listening on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Audible, iHeart, or Pandora. As you know, every week we're going to continue to bring you conversations just like this one, and all of them will definitely help you prepare for takeoff. Dr. Stevenson, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Terry. I appreciate it. Every bit of it. Thank you, sir.